Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our channel Pure Literature. Today, we embark on an exciting journey through the realm of knowledge as we explore the 100 best non fiction books of all time. From timeless classics to modern masterpieces, these books have shaped our understanding of the world and ourselves. Whether you are a seasoned reader or just starting your literary adventure, this curated list promises to inspire, educate, and provoke thought. Join us as we delve into the profound ideas, captivating narratives, and groundbreaking discoveries that make these books essential reads for anyone curious about the human experience. Let's dive in. The Education of Henry Adams, written by the historian, novelist, world traveler, caustic observer, and informal presidential advisor. The Education of Henry Adams was privately printed in 1907 and posthumously published in 1918 to great acclaim. It was a popular bestseller and won the Pulitzer Prize. If you read nothing else, check out pages 17 to the top of page 19 in the Modern Library edition for a study in concision, empathy, and cutting criticism in his narrative portrait of his grandmother, the Madam, wife of John Quincy Adams and daughter in law of the stern and efficient Abigail Adams. The Varieties of Religious Experience was an immediate bestseller upon its publication in June 1902. James discusses conversion, repentance, mysticism, and fears of punishment in the hereafter, as well as the religious experiences of such diverse thinkers as Voltaire, Whitman, Emerson, Luther, Tolstoy, and others. The result is a book that encourages readers to ask new questions rather than feel the old ones have been answered. Out from Slavery by Booker T. Washington, published to a great acclaim in 1901. This memoir helped make Washington the most prominent black spokesperson of his time. Washington vividly recounts his birth into slavery, his yearning for education, and his vision of an educational center for black students. A shrewd politician and a tireless promoter of the importance of education, Washington was devoted to advancing the cause of racial equality. On reading this classic autobiography, Langston Hughes noted Washington's story of himself, as half seen by himself, is one of America's most revealing books. A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf, based on a series of lectures Woolf delivered at Cambridge in 1928. A Room of One's Own argues that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of great books that could have been written by women if they had been given the time, means, education, and space that have always been granted to men. A brilliant early feminist text, Woolf argues for women's right to create, rather than the relegated to the role of domestic angel or idealized beauty. Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, first published in The New Yorker in 1962. The Silent Spring documented the many environmental problems caused by pesticides from alarming mutations to cancer into human beings. As a result of Carson's compelling argument as well as public outcry, the US government banned the use of DDT, a synthetic pesticide, and the EPA was formed. Sir David Attenborough, narrator of Planet Earth and the other documentaries, believe that Silent Spring and The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin are the two books that have most changed the scientific world. Selected Essays by T.S. Eliot, witty, learned, and filled with quips like it is a question of some nicety to decide how much must we read of any particular poet. This collection of literary criticism from T.S. Eliot, the author of The Wasteland, and others' poems, provides insight into Eliot's literary theory with essays on Seneca, Shakespeare, Dante's, William Blake, and Charles Dickens. This is an insightful, if slightly academic, take on West literary tradition by one of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century. The Double Helix by James T. Watson, the autobiographical account of the discovery of the structure of DNA. The double helix is unusual because of its memoir like and colorful approach. Harvard University Press declined to publish it for that very reason, while other readers criticized Watson for dismissing Rosalind Franklin, whose data Watson used. Nonetheless, the New York Times said that anyone seeking to understand modern biology and genomics could do much worse than start with the discovery of the structure of DNA, on which almost everything else is based. Speak Memory, written by the author of Lolita and Pale Fire. This memoir traces Nabokov's life from his childhood up until his emigration to US. Nabokov describes his aristocratic background, his lifelong love for butterflies, his education in Cambridge, a young love affair, and meeting his wife, Vera. In his signature episodic style, John Updike, author of The Witches of Eastwick and the Rabbit series, wrote that Nabokov has never written English better than in these reminiscences. Nabokov makes his past a brilliant icon, bejeweled, perspectiveless, and untouchable. The American Language, published in 1919. This book defends American English as a language in its own right. Instead of perversion of British English, man can also celebrate the fact that American English was, despite the massive sprawl of US, a single dialect. There may be slight differences in pronunciation and intonations, a southern softness, a Yankee drawl, a western burr, but in the words they use and the way they use them all Americans. Even the least tutored follow the same line. A Boston streetcar conductor could go to work in Chicago or San Francisco without running the slightest risk of misunderstanding his new fares. The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money by Keynes departed from classical economics by suggesting that a free market required government structure to operate efficiently. In doing so, the general theory made economics and economists socially relevant and introduced the idea that economics and politics were intertwined. Keynes argued against the long run view of economics, quipping that this long run is misleading guide to current affairs. In the long run, we are all dead. Economists set themselves too easy, useless a task. If in tempestuous seasons they can only tell us that when the storm is long past, the ocean is flat again. In 1971, President Nixon stated, "We are all Keynesians now." The lives of a cell. What does the mitochondria do? How are men similar to giant clams? How does language affect science? Weaving together music, biology, and medicine. This collection of essays tackles these questions in an introduction to science that is also a pleasure to read. When it was first published in 1974, Joyce Carol Oates praised Thomas for his effortless, beautifully toned style and described Thomas' essays themselves as undogmatic, graceful, gently persuasive, insisting upon the interrelatedness of all life. The book would go on to receive two National Book Awards. The Frontier in American History. In this hugely influential essay, Turner introduced the idea that the frontier, from the first Puritan settlers to the pioneers, shaped American democracy. Turner suggested that Americans had essentially evolved from a more European mindset to a distinctly American one, and argued that this evolution was a product of American population moving the West. The frontier mindset was distrustful of centralized authorities and hierarchies, more violent and less artistic, and that Turner thought explained a great deal about the US. Black Boy, originally titled American Hunger. This book is an autobiographical account of life in Jim Crow South, renowned for its radical portrayal of the realities of African American life. Under the operation of Jim Crow, Black Boy was an instant success, a landmark achievement that earned Wright an audience unlike any other African American writer of the time commanded. Wright's powerful, pressing work foretold his eventual ascendance to being one of the most important American authors of the 20th century, and paved the way for authors like James Baldwin, Brooks, and Lauren Hansberry after him. Aspects of the novel by E. M. Foster. A series of lectures on the essential parts of the novel, delivered in 1927 by the author of Howard's End, A Room with a View, A Passage to India, Where Angels Fear to Tread, and others. Foster distinguishes between flat versus round characters, discusses the importance of rhythm, and explains the difference between the plot and the story. The King Died and the Queen Died is a story. The King Died and the Queen Died of the Grief is a plot. The Civil War by Shelby. Shelby's tremendous sweeping narrative of a war that lasted for long, bitter years begins with Jefferson Davis' resignation from the United States Senate and Abraham Lincoln's departure from Springfield for the national capital. These two leaders are only the first of scores of exciting personalities that, in effect, make the Civil War a multiple biography set against the crisis of an age. When the novelist Walker Percy read the final book he wrote to Foote, it's a noble work. I am still staggered by the size of the achievement. It is the Iliad. The Guns of August by Barbara. In this Pulitzer Prize winning account, renowned historian Barbara W. Tuchman recreates the first month of the World War I, 30 days in the summer of 1914, that determined the course of the conflict, the century, and ultimately our present world. Beginning with the funeral of Edward VII and spectacularly peopled by the war's key players. Dutchman's magnum opus is a classic for ages. The Chicago Tribune called it more dramatic than fiction, a magnificent narrative beautifully organized and elegantly phrased, skillfully paced and sustained. The Proper Study of Mankind by Isaiah Berlin. When Isaiah Berlin died in 1997, one of his obituaries declared him the world's greatest talker, the century's most inspired reader, and one of the finest minds of our time. The Proper Study of Mankind brings together essays on everything from Machiavelli's morality, Tolstoy's theory of history, the meaning of liberty, and his own conversation with the great poet Anna. The New York Review of Books praised Berlin as the everyman's guide to everything exciting in the history of ideas. The Nature and Destiny of Man, a collection of theological lectures delivered by Niebuhr in 1939. The Nature and Destiny of Man tackles the Christian concept of human nature, the powerlessness of man, and Christianity's impact on human history. Delivered just before the outbreak of World War II, these lectures were so influential that Cold War containment policies and aspects of real politics can be traced back to them. Highly recommended for fans of ontology. Notes of a Native Son by James Baldwin. Written by the author of Go Tell It on the Mountain, Giovanni's Room, Another Country, and The Fire Next Time. This series of essays confronts the issue of race in both the United States and Europe. Reviewing the collection for the New York Times, the poet Langston Hughes wrote, "Few American writers handle words more effectively in the essay form than James Baldwin. I much prefer Notes of a Native Son to his novel Go Tell It on the Mountain." The Autobiography of Alice B. Toklas by Gertrude Stein. A Fox memoir told in the voice of Stein's partner, Alice B. Toklas. The really title, The Autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, is an account of life in the avant garde and love on the left wing. The autobiography became a runway success for its portrayal of life as an among artists, invoking a cast of characters like Picasso, Hemingway, and Fitzgerald, which cemented its legacy as a classic account for an American in Paris. Hemingway called it damn pitiful book, but many cherish it today as a testament of love to Alice, Gertrude's enduring muse. The Elements of Style by William Strunk and E.B. White. William Strunk Jr. was a professor at Cornell University when he self published A Simple Guide to American Grammar in 1919. Decades later, Strunk former student E.B. White worked with Strunk to revise the text. The resulting book was published in 1959 and it swiftly became a revered guide to grammar and usage. Dorothy Parker quipped, if you have any young friends who aspire to become writers, the second greatest favor you can do them is to present them with the copies of the Elements of Style. The first greatest, of course, is to short them now, while they are happy. An American Dilemma, published in 1944 and nearly 1500 pages long. An American Dilemma is a thorough study of race and democracy in America, funded by the Carnegie Corporation and written by a Swedish American in an attempt to find an unbiased author. The book details the many ways in which racism impedes African American success and social mobility. Myrdal came to the happy conclusion that democracy would triumph over racism, and while that day of ultimate triumph is still TVA, Myrdal's book was cited in the landmark case of Brown versus Board of Education. Principia Mathematica, a three-volume examination of formal logic. This text is most popularly known for proving that 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, and was hailed by the poet T.S. Eliot as perhaps a greater contribution to our language than it is to mathematics. Principia Mathematica created a new kind of mathematical notation, one that all mathematicians could use, as well as fostering connections between mathematics and philosophy, a fundamental text but not a fun read. Published in 1981, The Mismeasure of Man argues that the notion of an IQ, that intelligence can be accurately measured, is not only wrong but often classist and racist. This book, part theory, part history of science, explores how the definition of intelligence has been shaped by unconscious bias and sloppy conflations of correlation and causation, effectively calling out scientists for limp reasoning and forcing their facts to fit their hypotheses. Gould reserved special scorn for The Bell Curve, a bestseller, which argued that poverty was the result of inherited lower intelligence. Recommended reading for those opposed to eugenics. A work of scholarly analysis, The Mirror and the Lamp, explores the difference between the 18th and 19th century English literature. The mirror is a metaphor for the 18th century approach, which held that literature should reflect the real world. The lamp is a metaphor for the approach of romantics, who believed that the soul of the author should illuminate their work. If you have ever wanted to know how John Locke's notion of mind dependent secondary qualities influenced Wordsworth, this is the book for you. The Art of the Soluble. Dubbed the wittiest of all science writers, Richard Dawkins, and perhaps the greatest science writer of his generation, new scientist, Sir Peter Medawer, won a Nobel Prize in 1960 for his work on skin grafts. The Art of the Soluble is a meditation on the joys of science that also compares scientists who prioritize data over hypotheses to cows grazing on the pasture of knowledge, equal parts snark and brilliant observation. The Ants, winner of the 1991 Pulitzer Prize for General Nonfiction. This scientific textbook details everything you ever wanted to know, and then some about ants. The ants received rave reviews from non scientists with the Chicago Tribune calling it a monumental achievement, and the New York Times Book Review noting that science is rarely good literature. The Ant is an exalting exception. At 746 pages, it's a long read, but if you like ants, a riveting one. A Theory of Justice, regarded as 20th century most important work of political philosophy. A Theory of Justice explores how a modern civil society can just f- be fair to as many of its citizens as possible. A Theory of Justice was widely reviewed and discussed when it was published in 1971, with many critics comparing it to the work of Immanuel Kant and Jean-Jacques Rousseau writing in Civilization. Will Blythe praised the simple carpentry of its arguments, its egalitarian leanings, and its preoccupation with fairness, and claimed that A Theory of Justice is an American a book as say Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Art and illusion. Works of art are not mirrors, Gombrich wrote, but they share with mirrors that elusive magic of transformation, which is hard to put into words. Nevertheless, Gombrich tried to do just that in the exploration of how and why art changes over time, blending the history of art with the scientific theory of perception. Gombrich writes crisply and clearly about a wide range of topics, including but not limited to ancient Greek society, Renaissance art, and how artists develop style. A useful book if you ever wondered why babies in medieval paintings look nothing like babies in Renaissance paintings. The Making of the English Working Class. Published in 1963, Thompson's book focuses on the working class of the Industrial Revolution, the weavers, artisans, and croppers, whose collective class identity, he argues, was formed during this time. Thompson's conclusions were highly controversial since hypothesizing about the hopes and dreams of an entire socioeconomic class is tricky business. But by choosing to focus on the story of a class rather than an individual with the power and clout, Thompson's changed how history is studied. An excellent book for readers interested in mass political identity. When first published in 1903, The Souls of Black Folk redefined the history of the black experience in America and introduced the now famous problem of the color line. Today, it ranks as one of the most influential and resonant works in the history of American thought. It was so contentious when first published that the Nashville Banner warned its readers that this book is dangerous for the Negro to read, for it will only incite discontent and fill his imagination with things that do not exist or things that should not bear upon his mind. Principia Ethica, regarded among philosophers as a revolutionary guide to ethics and logic. This naughty text defines right acts as those acts that produce the most good, and also states that good is indefinable, filled with sentences like philosophers are constantly endeavoring to prove that yes or no will answer questions to which neither answer is correct, owing to the fact that what they have before their minds is not one question, but several, to some of which the true answer is no, to others yes. Philosophy and Civilization, a collection of 18 essays by one of the most influential minds in 20th century education reform. Dewey wrote extensively about the importance of educating children in order to advance civilization, and feared that American philosophy was hampered by its reliance on borrowed ideas and borrowed institutions. Though copies are now hard to find, you might agree with the review in in the January 1934 edition of the International Journal of Ethics, which declared this book an imaginative delight. On Growth and Form, written in 1917, this heavy tome, over 1,100 pages, introduced many readers to the field of mathematical biology, examining everything from soap bubbles to mollusks to a particular shape when they do. Scientists, architects, and anthropologists alike have all praised the book for its intellectual daring, though the science writer Philip Ball noted that, like Newton's Principia de Arche, Thompson's On Growth and Form is a book more often cited than read. Ideas and Opinions, a collection of the essays, letters, speeches, and interviews of Albert Einstein. Ideas and Opinions provides a quick glimpse into the mind of one of the most brilliant men of all time, discussing everything from classic literature to Marie Curie to explanation of general relativity. This book brings a reader into close contact with Einstein's genius, his wide-ranging interests, and even his sense of humor. The Age of Jackson, winner of the 1946 Pulitzer Prize for History, The Age of Jackson was praised by the New York Times as a remarkable piece of analytical history, full of vitality, rich in insights and new facts, and casting a broad shaft of illumination over one of the most interesting periods of our national life. It has since been criticized for failing to discuss slavery and the plight of Native Americans. Arthur would later serve as a special assistant to President John Kennedy and would win another Pulitzer Prize for A Thousand Days, his book about JFK's presidencies. The Making of the Atomic Bomb, a character driven narrative about the history of the atomic bomb from the 19th century to Nagasaki. This non-fiction classic reads like a compelling novel. It opens with Leo, the scientist who patented the nuclear reactor, being grumpy about the rain in London. Isaac Asimov described the making of the atomic bomb as the best, the richest, and the best description of the development of physics in the first half of this century that I have yet read, and it is certainly the most enjoyable. Could you wish for a better recommendation? Black Lamb and Grey Falcon. Born in 1892, Rebecca West was a British journalist, early feminist, and writer. The famously witty George Bernard Shaw claimed that Rebecca West could handle a pen as brilliantly as ever I could and much more savagely, and President Truman called her the world's best reporter. Black Lamb and Grey Falcons is West's combined history and the travelogue of modern day Yugoslavia. Based on a 6 week journey she made in 1937. West dedicated the book to my friends in Yugoslavia who are now all dead or enslaved. The Nazis invaded Yugoslavia shortly after she left. Larry McMurtry, the author of Lonesome Dove, wrote there are only a few great travel books. Rebecca's West, Black Lamb, and Grey Falcon is one. Autobiographies bring together 6 volumes of each personal memoirs, each one detailing a different period of his life. From his reveries over childhood and youth to his 1923 Nobel Prize lecture, the autobiographies lay bare the inner thoughts of this famous Anglo Irish poet. The autobiographies do roam from subject to subject, but readers who are fond of each poetry may be interested in gaining an in depth understanding of the man. Science and Civilization in China. Joseph was a well known historian and biochemist. When he began working on this series of books in 1954, over the course of 50 years and 7 volumes, the most recent volume was published in 2004. Joseph Needham and his research team sought to understand the long history of Chinese science, mathematics, astronomy, nautical technology, mechanical engineering, windmills, aeronautics, civil engineering, metallurgy, botany, physiological alchemy, and printing. More textbook than beach read. Goodbye to All That, a classic of World War One literature that is a memoir of childhood and a farewell to the pre World War One way of life. Graves' honest account of trench warfare, which faithfully record the heroism and brutality of military life, was extremely unpopular with the reading public. One contemporaneous reader wrote to Graves, "You are a discredit to the service, disloyal to your comrades, and typical of this miserable breed which tries to gain notoriety by belittling others." Homage to Catalonia, a personal account of the Spanish Civil War, written by the author of 1984 and Animal Farm. Orwell was 33 when he traveled to Spain to fight against the nationalist and fascist forces led by General Franco. Homage to Catalonia depicts the evils of both sides of the war, the filth and the grime, the idealism and the intrigue. According to the historian Raymond Carr, the Spanish Civil War produced a spate of bad literature. Homage to Catalonia is one of the few exceptions, and the reason is simple. Orwell was determined to set down the truth as he saw it. The autobiography of Mark Twain. Dictated during the last years of his life, the autobiography of Mark Twain is more like a transcription of a stand up routine than a traditional memoir. Filled with scathing, winding anecdotes, many of which Twain did not want published until he had been dead for a century. The autobiography is Mark Twain in exactly, precisely his own words, from his concerns about money to his dislike of Theodore Roosevelt and everything in between. Children of Crisis, a Pulitzer Prize winning series of interviews with American children. Children of Crisis focuses on how children of different ages, races, and social classes confront change and construct personal identities. In his attempt to evoke, apprehend, and come to terms with the psychological realities of particular men, women, and children, Robert Calls lived with the immigrant workers, urban poor, and sharecroppers whose children he interviewed, and his study destroyed long held stereotypes about these men and women. A study of history. Toynbee traces the rise and fall of 19 different civilizations in his 12-volume, 7,000-page work of history, arguing that civilizations arise out of society wide responses to challenges. Toynbee attempted to create a universal theory of civilization, identifying and labeling different phases. The first volume was published in 1934 and the last in 1961. This monumental effort was hailed by Clifton Fadiman as the book most assured of being read 100 years from now. We will let you, the reader, be the judge of that. The Affluent Society tackles how the post World War II American economy was making the rich richer, yet keeping the poor just as poor. Galbraith was a committed capitalist who also argued for a government willing to invest in roads, schools, and hospitals as well as businesses. Ultimately, Galbraith was interested in finding tailored solutions to large problems. Where the market works, I am for that. Where the government is necessary, I am for that. I am deeply suspicious of somebody who says, I am in favor of privatization, or I am deeply in favor of public ownership. I am in favor of whatever works in the particular case. Present at the Creation, a Pulitzer Prize winning memoir by a former Secretary of State and architect of government foreign policy during World War II, the beginning of Cold War, and the Korean War. Foreign Policy revisited the memoir in 2017, writing that Exxon stood like a ringmaster at the center of a complex diplomatic and political circus. This is a must read book not only for historians but also for anyone interested in national policy, diplomacy, or military strategy. It is essential, especially today, to understand how America came to play the central role in the world and the consequences of failure. The Great Bridge reveals the saga behind the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge, one of the oldest suspension bridges in the world and a beautiful feat of engineering. The Los Angeles Times praised The Great Bridge as a book so compelling and complete as to be a literary monument. Newsday wrote The Great Bridge is a stupendous narrative about the building of the Brooklyn Bridge, with a cast of thousands, give or take hundred, whose major characters come alive on the page as authentically, as creatively as would the as would their fictional counterparts if one had the imagination to dream up such a yarn. A survey of American Civil War literature with thumbnail portraits of various novelists, poets, and diarists. Wilson read many forgotten memoirs and novels in an attempt to find the best Civil War literature. He wanted Northerners to read Southern literature and vice versa. Wilson also included unknown writers, including women and some African Americans, in his survey. The result is a wide ranging look at how United States chronicled the Civil War. Samuel Johnson, the son of a bookseller, Samuel Johnson, is considered one of the greatest minds in the English history. He was a well known critic, political commentator, and the author of Rassalis and later a dictionary of the English language, which reigned supreme until the Oxford English Dictionary was published 100 years later. Published in 1977, Bates' biography of Samuel Johnson won an astonishing array of prizes: the Pulitzer Prize, the National Book Award, and the National Book Critics Circle Award. A marvelous book about a genius who literally defined the English language. Thanks for sticking with me through this incredible list of nonfiction must reads. Which books are you adding to your reading list? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more great content. Happy reading, and I will see you in the next video.